Welcome, parents, back to another Parenting Athletic Kids Essentials podcast. We have Paul Weidner with us again today. Paul, welcome back, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yep, super excited about this one. As usual, we're talking about thought control and basically, again, what parents can lean into to help your sons or daughters understand positive thinking, negative thinking. Can they control their thoughts? Can they not? Is it something that overcomes them and they have no control? So we're going to try to really narrow this in, hopefully give parents, you all, some great tools and techniques and things you can pass along to your sons or daughters that will help to optimize their performance. Paul, you jump in first. Where are we going with this? What do you want to start with?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is asking ourselves how many of our athletes believe that thought control is something that's possible. I know you talked about that before we started this podcast off air a little bit ago. You asked for a show of hands the other day of high school age kids, so kids that should be fairly self-aware. How many of you think that you can control your thoughts? You said about half of them raised their hand.
Right.
And obviously, as mental performance coaches, we believe that you absolutely can. Now, I think the balance that we try to strike when we're working with our athletes is how much you're trying to control your thoughts versus just accepting them and realizing what you can do about it from there. So a lot of people are thinking to themselves like, okay, so I was thinking something and then I went over here and maybe had a negative thought slip in, and then they're really hard on themselves for having that negative thought. We don't want that either, right? We want to understand that we should just always be aware of what our thoughts are and what they're doing for us. And then when it's appropriate, be able to insert your own voice that is going to tell you something different, something more positive, something more, whatever, because that stream of consciousness, if you're focusing on, maybe the actual conversation that's happening in your head, a lot of times we don't talk back to the voice that's in our head. We just let it happen, whatever it is. And in sports, when it knocks you down, that voice is oftentimes negative, right? So understanding what you can do about that is really important. And understanding that you can do something about that is also very important.
Perfect. Yeah, I think parents, the first thing to just ask your son or daughter is, do they think they have control of their thoughts? And again, it wasn't, I was a little bit shocked when I asked high school guys that, but it's not something they've ever thought of. They think thoughts just come and go, which is true. But then they don't have adjustments on that. They let their emotions ride whatever wave it is that they've been pushed into, whether it's negative or positive, and it just kind of gets out of control. So asking your son or daughter, do you understand that you control your thoughts, or do you think you do? Right. And then we can go to the next step with it, which is what Paul's leaning into. I think that's great. Also, don't want to try to talk to our son or daughter about these are thoughts that you shouldn't be having, right? These negative thoughts, we don't want to say you shouldn't have those. That can be pressure-filled, anxiety-filled. We let our thoughts come in. We're aware of, are they helpful, hurtful, useful, positive, negative? And then we want to teach them to make adjustments on that. So it's kind of a process of that. So again, allowing thoughts. I think if you have built a foundation of what's important, what I'm passionate about, what my goals are, I have a growth mindset, all things that we've talked about. If you have a foundation of this, it's easier for the athlete to, one, they'll have less negative thinking or bad thoughts. And two, they'll be able to be more self-aware when they are having. So asking a 10-year-old that has a fixed mindset and no goals and all these other things to try to maneuver through this is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
So
very much so.
That's kind of a long way of saying, like, let's build a really great foundation, and then it becomes easier to be self-aware of what our thoughts are or what we want them to be. Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit more. If you would dive into, like, what's a common thought pattern? What's some negative thinking? Let's go sports specific here. Like, what could happen and what can be our response? We have set a little bit of a foundation. Now negative thoughts are popping in. As a mental performance coach, what can we do? What's the next step?
Yeah. I always talk about this, and it's usually with the thought process in mind of trying to be present. But I always talk about how the worst enemy of an athlete are frustrations about the past or fears about the future. And I think almost all unhelpful thoughts fall into one of those two categories, whereas we really don't want to have either of those things be happening, and we want to be truly present. But when it comes to the things that are going through our minds, obviously it's like, bad call from the umpire, and now we're frustrated about that. We're mad at the umpire. We now realize we're down 0-1 or 0-2. And so we're consciously thinking to ourselves, now we're in a worse place, instead of just accepting it and then asking yourself what you can do about it. And then the other one on the other side, fears about the future. There are a lot of athletes, especially if they tend to live and die by every at bat. There's a very high amount of athletes that feel a very large amount of here we go again thought processes. And that's a really hard one, right? It's like, okay, I know the coach was talking to me about, strikeouts, and I know that I don't want to do it. And now it's 0-2. I mean, how many guys that have struck out their first two at bats, and then now it's 0-2 or 1-2 in their third at bat? You can just see it in them. They're like, here it is. It's happening again. Here we go again. Well, those are obviously very unhelpful thoughts, right? And so whether that's a stream of consciousness that's an actual dialogue that's happening in their head, or just an overall thought kind of feeling combo, it's the frustration about a bad call or something that your teammate did or whatever, or it's a here we go again anxiety, fearful of what might happen. I think it falls into one of those two categories. I don't know if you have anything different from that that you tend to think of, encompasses most of the negative thoughts that people feel.
No, I think that's exactly right. And it'll be all kinds of things based off of not being in the present. So I think that's awesome parents to set the foundation of, we want our athlete to be in the moment, in the present moment, playing free, playing with passion in that present moment. So as you're having conversations, if you do this, parents, realizing that's the foundation, that's the place we want them to be. And that's obviously easier said than done, but that's where we want them to get back to. So again, them having awareness, talking to them about when you're at your best, when you're feeling great about being out there, what's that feel like? Let's make sure they know what that is, so they know what they're trying to get back to. So as I do this with mental performance clients, if they don't know the foundation where they want to get back to, it's much harder to navigate this. So that's really great. Start with that, parents. Let's write it down. Let's have them aware of, this is what it feels like when I'm thinking, how my body feels, all these other things when I feel really great out on the field, the court, whatever it might be. So that's really cool. And then, negative thoughts, getting them out of that. I think we all know what those are. Teammate makes an error and I'm frustrated. Umpire makes a bad call and I'm frustrated. I screw up and I'm frustrated. All these things, I call it noise, all these things, and then noise starts to get into our heads. And Paul's right. It's thinking, here we go again. It's thinking, I'm in a tough spot. I'm thinking the umpire put me here and he sucks. All these things. So we know what those are, I think, as parents. We see that all the time. What do we convey to our son or daughter then? We have a little bit of a foundation. We've hopefully created a growth mindset. We understand what it feels like when we feel really good. What do we do next? Now we're going down a bad path. Now we're getting into some negative thought patterns. What happens next?
Yeah. Since we are specifically on the topic of thought control, let's talk about some of the power of self-talk. And I have two different types of versions of self-talk. One of them is meant to maybe affect the emotional state that the player is in a positive way. And then the other one is meant for kind of filling the void that can let other things creep in. And you don't get to use that for a very extended amount of time. But when you need it for like 3, 4, 5 second bursts, you can use it. I call it convicted thinking. But let's talk about the bigger picture self-talk that can help you with your emotions that can be tied to your thought processes. So two things. When you're talking about self-talk, I think that if you ask an athlete, okay, what would be an example of a good self-talk you can say to yourself? And they may say things like, I feel great right now, or I'm seeing the ball so well, or I'm the man, I'm great. And for every single athlete that when they tell themselves that, they can wholeheartedly believe that and internalize that and take a step forward in the right direction because of it, I wouldn't encourage them to use any other type of self-talk than that. However, a lot of very cerebral and actually very self-aware athletes, they understand that they're actually lying to themselves, which gives them further anxiety and frustration about the situation. So what I've tried to encourage athletes to do lately is think about 2, 3, 4 things that no matter how you're doing, how you're feeling, what's happening, are truths about yourself that you're proud of, that you can be telling yourself when you need it most. So just got done talking with our college program the other day, and they work super hard out here. They put in long days, like they grind through it. They're always bringing good energy. We're super proud of the group that we have. And I asked them, I said, okay, so if you're not feeling good, the pitcher that's across from you is, a Division I JUCO guy that's committed to Louisville next year. And, you don't have the upper hand because you're not going to play Power 5 baseball. The thing that you should be leaning on most is something like, I deserve this opportunity, or I believe that I deserve to have success, which is different than saying I'm the man, I'm going to have success. But this truth that you can always tell yourself, you need to be armed with a few of those statements, because otherwise you're going to know if you're lying to yourself. And what are those things that you're truly proud of? Bringing it to like what parents can do about this. Just ask your athlete to come up with 2 or 3 of those things that they know universally, not situationally related. What can I tell myself when I need it most to get my mind away from, I suck, umpire's bad, blah, 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 and more towards like a step in the right direction, which is like, I work hard. I went to hitting all winter long to be in this place where this spring I deserve this at bat, whether I'm an underclassman getting a pinch hit opportunity or, a senior that's in a section championship, and a lot of things have been building that. So I just want athletes to understand that it can be a bit pie in the sky view if you're always telling yourself things like, I'm the best, I'm the best. Well, if you don't believe it, try to find things that you do believe and then go after those things. Does that make sense?
100%. Really, really well said. I'd add a couple things to that. We talk about, and it doesn't always have to be positive. It can be, what I call useful. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to smash this guy, get a hit here, score on this guy, whatever it is. It can be, I'm going to take my best swing here. Not necessarily positive, but useful. And I love what you said. Parents, go through these with the athletes, and we'll kind of narrow this down a little bit more. But what empowers you? What makes you feel like you can take the next step forward? It might not always be positive. It might be, like Paul said, something that you can really lean into, but also it doesn't have to be super positive. It can be a useful thing. The other thing I would say, a lot of athletes at this point get so introspective, and it's about me, it's about I. A lot of great self-talk is about us or we, so in this situation, I'm here for the team might be something good to say, or I'm just grateful to be here, which changes it from me to a bigger picture. So parents, you might want to incorporate that. If your athlete is just narrow in themselves so much, and it's hard to negotiate that, but maybe to Paul's point, you have 2 or 3 things, you talk to them about it, what feels good. But again, maybe not just making it positive. It could be useful, or it could be something outside of themselves, kind of the bigger, it's a beautiful day. I just love playing this game. Things of that nature can sometimes just drop things down.
Yeah, I love that. you're talking about being engaged. So one of the key elements I think of being able to perform under pressure is the building blocks to it is your engagement with the people and or the event that you're in. And so when we talk about the importance of being present, and really that's where our best thoughts can come from, is if we're fully present, make sure that we're making a conscious effort to engage with our teammates, to positively engage with our coaches, and then obviously engage with the event. So you'll notice with athletes, strike out or they have a bad turnover in basketball and they go to the bench. They're not doing it necessarily because they're pouting, but it's much more comfortable to just be like, I'm on my own right now. I don't want to engage with other people. Reality is that to get you back to the present moment and kind of turning the corner back up to where we want to be, leaning into kind of the social midline of the group around you and the event that you're in is a great way to do that. So that's maybe a thought control, maybe it's emotional control. I'm not sure what that falls into, what I'm just saying necessarily, but the engagement with the people and the event that you're in, as opposed to isolating yourself and trying to stay only in your mind and try to think your way out of it, it's probably not going to work. You can try, it's probably not going to work. Make sure you continue to engage. And as parents, talk about like things that you can look for that are not results based. A great way to do it is to be like, hey, I know you struck out and I know you were frustrated about that. I know you missed that shot or turned the ball over. I know you were frustrated about that. And then as soon as you possibly could, you chose to engage with your teammate, engage with a coach. That's a really cool thing that you can talk about after the game as a good positive step forward. And if you think that only applies to 12-year-olds, you're wrong, man. That's college baseball all the way up. Like, engage with the people around you. It will help bring you back to a better place. And when you're there, your thoughts will naturally start to be better if you're just in a better place overall.
Love that. As you're talking through that, so I was just talking to Drew, my younger son, who's kind of in a place he's thinking a lot, thinking about what he should be doing, not doing, blah, blah. It's not necessarily all negative, but he's just got really into the I or the me. And I asked him, he journals before, I asked him to consider doing two things. One, writing down gratitude. So I'm grateful to be here today. I'm grateful to be with my teammates. And number two, to both your points, really, number two, before games, scrimmages, grabbing a teammate or two teammates and saying, let's do this today. Let's have a lot of fun here. Let's have a great day. And that just, this breath of fresh air, this, I don't have to worry about me so much type of stuff. Really good. Anything else you wanted to go with that? I got another kind of direction I might take this a little bit.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So just as I see it, there's two main times where we have to control our thoughts. One is before a game, right? So athletes that start having negative thoughts somewhere before the game. And so then I want to talk about what that might look like, things that we can do to, again, recognize the negative thoughts, but then turn them to something positive or useful, and then in-game situations. So let's break those down a little bit more. I think these are the two main, if not the only places that we get into trouble, most athletes. So pre-game, like what's routines, thought control things that you think, that you offer? Where does it start? Where does it end? Yeah, ideas on that.
Yeah. So I will take it to the sport of baseball just because I think it's in what we're most familiar with, and we can talk about it with other sports as well, but let's talk about baseball. So for me, when you say before the game, things that you can do and routines that you can have to put you in a good place, I also think that same type of self-talk probably applies during down times where you're not actually competing during a baseball game as well. So like I would argue that the two different types of self-talks for me are, I'm competing right now, and what am I controlling with my thoughts? And then there's a different type of self-talk that comes with like, I'm not hitting for 7 more batters and I'm not feeling great right now, and what can I do to put myself in a good spot? Like I think the pregame and the downtime in-game, I think those are similar types of self-talk for when I'm working with an athlete, what I'm talking about. That being said, I love how you talked about routines. So every single person, and they need to own this. It really can't be, you can give them suggestions about what that may be, but until they own that routine and understand what it's doing for them, it's not going to be as effective. But having a routine that they feel like puts them in the same place mentally, at least the same starting place mentally every single time, is very comforting. Because a lot of people, if they start to have self-doubt or whatever, I'm going to use this analogy. I'm not saying this is actually what's going through their head, but imagine being in a race and you're starting to doubt yourself. And the more you doubt yourself, it's like you got a 5-yard penalty back here and everybody else gets to start at the starting line up here. And you start to believe that, right? If you can give yourself a routine where at least you know at the start of the game, or when I'm trying to get back up to like the baseline of things, that I'm at the same starting position every single time, I know I can manage my emotions from there accordingly. It's just when you start to feel very, just your default position is just a negative place. The first thing I would suggest to an athlete is to try to develop a routine physically that's attached to something mentally that can help get you to the same starting line that you want to be every single time. So that's that type of self-talk. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because you did describe it as pregame. Take it, like, go. I want to know what your thoughts are, or push back on my different type of self-talk there. I'd love to know what you think.
No, I like that. Like, I guess I've never thought about that. Like the downtime, or you're sitting on the bench at a basketball game, and weird thoughts or negative. When I get in here, I hope I have success versus I am going to have success for sure. That's really awesome. So I think when I'm talking pregame again, and this is parents, to have a conversation with your son or daughter, like, how are you feeling in the pregame? Maybe everything's great. Like I know a lot of athletes just, I feel great leading up to a game. Awesome. Just keep doing whatever it is you're doing, right? This is for the son or daughter that is getting over anxious and feels, negative thoughts, or sick to their stomach, or whatever it might be, where they're just not super comfortable pregame. Or as Paul has said, in that downtime, you can ask that question too. How are you doing in the downtime when you are up seventh, or you're not starting the game? So I talk about body scans. So I always think it's a good for any athlete to at some point, kind of in the pregame and the warm-ups, wherever feels comfortable, do a body just as a check-in, right? So how does my body feel? My level of energy good, and how am I mentally? And you can do this on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being everything's great. If they're sitting at a 2 mentally, like that would be unsure, negative thoughts. Okay, what do we put in right then? What's some good conversations that you want to have with yourself at this point? Positive thoughts, these things that you've talked to your son or daughter about before, useful thoughts. It's a great day. I love being here. I'm so happy to be here with my teammates. I'm going to take my best swings today. Again, not necessarily lying to themselves. Probably the best thing is controllable things, right? So again, I'm going to take my best swings. I'm going to have a great plan today. I'm going to rebound like a machine today. My energy is going to be off the charts. All these things to start heading back into the right direction, getting them back where they want to be. And this, to Paul's point, this takes a little bit of practice, maybe. Like, it's not, if they have super high anxiety pre-games, it's not going to change overnight. But starting to find things that they can lean into. Maybe it's some deep breaths. Maybe it's a little visualization. We won't get into all these different techniques right now, but so finding and talking to them about, just, again, here's what I would do if I was a parent. How do you feel pregame? Feel great. Awesome. Keep doing that. There's sometimes I get tense. Okay, where would you like to be mentally? Like, what are some thoughts and patterns that we can start to do this? And then, to Paul's point, in-game downtime, what about that? Do you ever struggle with negative thinking before you're getting into the game? You're a pitcher and you're a reliever, and you go down to the bullpen, and that's when negative thoughts start to creep in. So parents just having conversations and asking them, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And then we've already talked about it can be positive, useful stuff outside themselves, all that kind of stuff. Anything you'd add? Did I miss anything there?
No, I thought that was great. Good job.
So how about in game then? Like we're at the plate, something bad happens. We just missed that, miss a free throw, miss a wide open wide receiver, whatever, miss a penalty kick in soccer. And that's those negative, taking us out of the present moment, thoughts start creeping in. What are your suggestions?
So, I there probably could be a whole podcast on what we consider to be like releases or your ability to turn the corner. I kind of like to use the analogy of like a line that you're on, and that's the ideal line. You try to take as many events in a game from that line as possible. And when something bad happens, you will naturally dip below it. But what do we have in our arsenal to turn the corner to come back up? Releases are a great one of those. So if it's in a baseball game, if you need to take your helmet off for a second, and then when you take your helmet off, you kind of visualize like those negative thoughts and the frustrations go with it. And then you put your helmet back on and you're ready to kind of go to battle again. Again, probably not going to dive too much into releases unless you would like to or happy to. But biggest thing for me is there will come a time in most sports, I can think of as especially true in baseball, where the sport of baseball works in like peaks and valleys, kind of like everything builds to a pitch and then there's kind of and then everything builds to a pitch and then there's kind of a downtime. When you need to control your thoughts in that crescendo or when that pitch is about to take place, I think there's a lot of value in having, a 2 to 3 word phrase, even a 1 word phrase that you can insert into your mind on a loop. That the simple goal of it is to fill the void to make sure that negative things don't have as much room as they could have to come in. I know there's varying views on the effectiveness of that. I found it to be fairly effective with the athletes that I work with. The biggest thing to make sure they understand is that the thing that you're telling yourself should be very general, positive, almost to the point of being like kind of cheesy almost, because all you're trying to do is fill the stream of consciousness void so that you don't have room for something else to come in. And the logic behind that is this, especially for our athletes that are maybe a little bit more prone to that anxiety, whatever that may be. We'd like to get at the root of it, but just in the moment, they're a little bit more anxious. The anxiety will always default to a position of the thing that we feel like can hurt us most. And for guys, people who are listening, I put that in air quotes. Not hurt us like we're going to get hit in the head by the pitch, but just whatever we feel like is most dangerous to us. That's what our thoughts will default to in the moment if we're generally anxious in that moment. And so is there something we can do to 100% overcome that? Maybe not, but as much void filling as we can do to make sure that we're almost robots at that point when we're trying to compete, I think there's a lot of value in that. So this is not your truthful statement that's trying to control your emotional state in that moment. This is the statement that you're telling yourself that helps you control your stream of consciousness when you need it right now. Like right now. It's not going to work for 5 minutes. It's going to work for 5 seconds. And when you're performing each pitch, sometimes that's all you need. So that's my opinion on that. I have seen it work. I don't know if you have differing opinions on the value of that. I would actually love it because I have talked to some other performance coaches. Some of them are like, I totally agree. And some of them are like, I don't know, like that void filling thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm in the sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't mode, but it's about trial and error.
Yes.
Again, it first starts with awareness. So the athlete being aware when they get outside of the present moment, when they get outside of a flow and a free feeling play and into some negative thoughts. So when does this occur? And parents, again, we can help with this. We can see it. Like, I know you can see it on a baseball field. I know you can see it basketball. Something bad happens. Does our son or daughter look like they respond really well to it? And look like can be deceiving too, right? Like, we're not sure. Maybe physically they don't, but mentally they're good. Who knows? But helping them, again, asking them through a game, through an event, did you feel good throughout it? How about after that strikeout? How did you feel? Or after that tough call, or after that error, or whatever it might be? after that missed shot. How did you feel? Did you feel like you responded really well? Yeah, I was good. I was right back. Awesome. We don't have to talk about this. It was a little bit of a struggle. Okay. Then to Paul's point, I love the release. The release, and we won't get at all the different ones as you said, but the release is a physical action generally that I see that I'm having negative thoughts. Now I'm going to do something physical and I'm going to get rid of it. Take off the hat, pick up some dirt, throw some dirt, clap my hands together, undo, redo batting gloves, like I'm done with this thought. That is a nice segue into the next step that Paul's talking about. Okay, now what are we going to start thinking about? Is it positive? Is it a gap filler? Is it useful? I got to get back on track, get back into this moment. And again, yes, it might be short-lived. It might be a 5-second thing, but in baseball, that's all you need. In basketball, I got to get back down to the court, and then the flow of the game picks right back up. Boom, I'm back. So that's, for me, that's the process. First, awareness, if I get knocked out of the present or not, and then some sort of release, and then some sort of thought that gets me moving back on in the right direction. And again, this might be different. Maybe a person doesn't need a release. Maybe it's just a deep breath and a thought, positive or useful thought to get back on track. So playing with that a little bit, super valuable. Will it always work? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's a bigger missed shot in quote marks than the other one, and it's harder, but this is all just the process of growth. And again, I love talking to my kids about this and not about the outcome. So when you lean into stuff like how can we really serve our son or daughter, the mental game and the emotions of it and their thoughts, there's nothing bigger. And it's nothing easier just to have a conversation about, because you don't know what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's great. Maybe their body language doesn't reflect actually how they're thinking. I was just talking to a pitcher the other day, and this pitcher looked super tense to me, super tense. And I said, "What, are you tense? Are you wound tight when you're on the mound?" And he's like, "No, I feel like I'm pretty free." And I said, "Well, your body looks super tense." And he said, "Well, I'm trying to really be in my back hip. I'm trying to really get in my back hip." And I said, "Your whole body is looking like that to me. Is there a way that you can do that without having tense facial muscles, tense arms? I think this is kind of slowing you down and not letting you be the best you can be." So anyways, I won't get into all that, but we don't know. So it's great to have conversations about that. Anything as I was firing through that struck you or you'd add to or subtract from? Or
No, not really. And I love the conversation about kind of what should be said. You said it to me. It's the first time I had ever heard it, and one of our previous episodes where you talked about how self-talk a lot of times is positive, but it actually should be positive or useful. So I want to kind of tie it back to okay, how can we summarize this in a really good way? Like, any positive or any self-talk that's taking your athlete in the right direction really can be positive. I think it's really important that for athletes that are especially more cerebral type athletes, that it's believable and controllable. And then to your point, which you've said so well, is that it can also just be useful. So like anything that's like, so I'm looking to my left and that's not the right way to look. And if useful means I'm looking to my right, like how can we get you looking to your right more often, or just looking the right direction so you're going forward, not backwards? It's just, that's what I think of when I hear you say a useful self-talk. And I love that, because it's just about taking steps forward more than anything else, and not sitting necessarily with our negative thoughts. So really good. But no, I don't have anything to add to that on the two different types of self-talk. Hopefully it was articulated in a way that makes sense to both, to parents, especially as they see it. The one other thing that I would add before I think I'm done with it is when we think about thought control and a lot of mental skills, we think about it as either they're bad at it or they're good at it, and we don't think about that from a swing or a free throw or whatever. All we think about is, are we improving in it? And there's the people that are the best in the world at it, and there's people that are awful at it. And most of us fall somewhere in the middle, right? So for your athlete, try to make sure that while growth mindset itself is a mental skill, like have a growth mindset about your ability to control your thoughts. Just try to be better at it than you were before. And you might be done playing competitive athletics and still only gotten to be, 2/3 of the way on that continuum. That's okay, because if you hadn't been working on it, you'd be over in the worst 10 percentile like you were before. So don't worry about being perfect at it. Don't be hard on yourself if you're not perfect at it, because it's not a yes or a no statement. It's just be better at it than you were the day before, and keep going.
That's awesome. Let me just circle back as you were saying that the useful thought or the positive thought, sometimes we'll get too far ahead of ourselves on that, right? So we get strike one. I want to put a useful positive thought in here, but I'm still thinking about getting a hit here, or the positive or useful thought. I think the best way to think about it is it's just the next one step forward, because athletes think down the road with it, if this makes sense, and just and that can stop them from having one useful thought. Like I'm thinking down the road and I really want to be positive and I really want to get back to this perfect place. But to kind of your point, no, it's just, if I get to that next one step forward, instead of staying the same or going backward, if I just get to that next one step forward, now I can take the next step and the next step and the next step. And now I'm back in a good place. Instead of staying stagnant or going backwards. Really good. So to wrap this baby up, again, try and help me if I miss anything. First, number one, parents, asking your son or daughter if they feel like they do have control of their thoughts, with awareness of the fact that that doesn't mean we don't have negative thoughts. We do. But we have control of what we're going to do with those thoughts at that point, recognizing them. And then, do we need to switch it? Do we need to go to useful or positive? And then again, having conversations with them pre-game and downtime. How are we? Maybe we're great pre-game, but downtime we're not as good. So what can we start? How can we start manipulating that downtime with some useful thinking, with whatever it might be? And then in game, in those moment to moment situations, how are we doing? So kind of those three areas. And again, talking to them about a baseline, understanding where they want to be, and then ways to get them to how Paul likes to frame it. We're going to dip below, we're going to get above. How do we get back to that point? Conversations about that. So I love that. Did I miss anything there in the summary?
No, I think that's great. Good job.
Awesome. All right, we'll wrap this baby up. Parents, thanks so much for tuning in. If you have questions for Paul or myself, feel free to email me at mindrighttraining@gmail.com, or put comments in the comment below the YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever you're listening to. Paul, thanks again so much for being here, and we'll be back again really soon with another podcast.
Yep. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. If you want more information on strategies that you can use to help optimize your son or daughter's athletic experience, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.